state law. There is a proposing ordinance in the packet, or was in the packet some months ago, which laid out the terms of what the special service area is supposed to accomplish. And I just remind everyone that under the state law, we adopt the proposing ordinance, and then we have to wait approximately 60 days, a minimum of 60 days, until we can have a hearing. So tonight, the hearing is to allow residents who live in the area or other people to express any concerns or ask questions about the content of the proposed ordinance that was already passed and what the special service area would provide. I think I summarized the proposed ordinance somewhat when the board first passed it, but I'll just reiterate that this concerns Kingsbury Court, a private street in Riverwoods. There are 9 properties that would pay taxes to support the maintenance of the street, and then I think a total of 11 PIN numbers. The special service area would provide both ongoing maintenance pursuant to a maintenance levy that could be adopted annually or not used from time to time according to what the residents ask us to do, as well as providing for an initial rehabilitation of the project. And I think that they really want to do this year. I think Pat Glynn has been working on getting contractors lined up and maybe some plans starting to form. The maximum amount of bonds that could be issued to pay for the initial rehabilitation would be $200,000, and the maximum interest rate would be 5.5%. The maximum maturity of the bonds would be 12 years. We use the 12-year number because oftentimes it's 10 years and 6 months or something like that. But essentially, if the project goes forward, we'll have bids, we'll have contractors bidding on the project. And once we know what the scope of the project is and the cost, and that the amount of bonds can pay for it all, we'll issue the bonds. We believe Northside Community Bank has already expressed to me that they'd be prepared to purchase the bonds, provided everything is in order. And that would provide a source for funding the initial rehabilitation that's described in the ordinance. The maximum annual levy in this case is $9,000 per year, essentially $1,000 per house. The residents are not required to go up to the maximum, but that has to be provided in the ordinance. And then there's a escalation clause that allows that $9,000 number to go up with the cost of living. This would be a flat tax SSA, not an ad valorem. There's a special tax roll in the proposing ordinance that shows that the benefit provided to each of the tax-paying PIN numbers in the area is essentially the same, a benefit factor of 1. So we would expect that the taxes would be spread on an equal basis to all the properties in the special service area. If we adjourn the hearing tonight, if we close it, then we would expect to receive petitions from residents in the area who are in favor of it. Our special service areas for road maintenance are formed under a particular section of the state law, which provides that instead of having a backdoor referendum, those in favor have to signify their approval. And we need the owners of 51% or more of the lots to say they're in favor of going forward. If that happens, then at another board meeting, this board could pass an ordinance that would actually establish the special service area. So tonight is just a hearing to answer any questions, to describe what the proposed ordinance is about, and I'm done.
Are there any questions from the board? Henry? Henry, you need to unmute.
Just for the record, it's Kingswood, not Kingsbury.
Sorry. And that's what it says in the notice. I just can't read it. Thank you, Henry.
Are there any other questions from the board? Are there any questions from anyone who has signed in? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn the special hearing or the public hearing on proposed formation of special service area number 34?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, and as I noted in the packet earlier, we're now under Public Act 101-0640, which requires all votes to be roll call when it's an electronic meeting. So may I have a roll call, please?
Do you have this, Jenny?
Trustee Chamberlain,
Aye.
Trustee Clayton,
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein,
Aye.
Trustee Haber,
Aye.
Trustee Hollander,
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
All right, the special public hearing is adjourned. I now call to order the public hearing, I now call to order the Board of Trustees meeting for June 16th, 2020. May I have a roll call, please?
Trustee Chamberlain,
Here.
Trustee Clayton,
Here.
Trustee Goldstein,
I'm here.
Trustee Haber,
Here.
Trustee Hollander,
Here.
Trustee Jamerson,
Here.
President Norris.
Here. For the record, this meeting is being conducted via electronic attendance as authorized under Public Act 101-0640, with the state of emergency having been declared by the governor and continued under Executive Order 2020-39.
I think so.
Present in the building in accordance with the ordinance is the mayor, the clerk, and Chief Dano.
Jenny, I think that was fresh breadcrumbs. I should have made the, I didn't need to.
You got it, okay. Self back off. I thought I was off. Okay. First order of business is approval of minutes from the Board of Trustees meeting of May 5th, 2020. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any additions or corrections?
Mr. Mayor, I don't have any additions or corrections, but I do want to make a point that the minutes from the meeting of May 5th are, while Jerry and Daphne do a great job of getting the minutes put together from our meetings, I do not believe that the minutes that were posted for May 5th accurately depict what was said during that meeting. Unfortunately, there's no recording of that meeting, so any changes that I would even suggest to make would be an I said, you said situation. And so I'm not going to go down that path right now. I don't think it would be productive, but I do think that I just want to be on record to say I don't think the minutes reflect what was done during that meeting. So I will not be in favor of approving the minutes.
All right, for the record too, I will note that the reason there was no recording made is the mayor did not hit the record button on the Zoom conference because the mayor's still learning how to do this as well. And I apologize and regret that that was not done. Yes, Mr. Hollander.
Could we hear further from Rick, his concerns? Because if there's a concern, I'd like to know what that is as well, because I'm unaware of it and it might change how I view them.
Well, I think there's several points. There were a lot of comments that were made by many trustees, some that were actually quite shocking to me. And I don't think it pays to say who said what at this point in time, Henry. I just think that it's unfortunate that there's no recording of the meeting so that we could have that on paper, but and I don't know that it's worth discussing any further, but I just can't, I have an issue with.
I will also note that our policy is moved to where we do not do verbatim minutes. We are not required to. We try to get the gist of conversation. So we are trying to avoid specific comments by specific people for that reason. It's very difficult to catch those. Those of us who are attorneys and did litigation will tell you how difficult it is to get good records, even from certified court reporters in all cases. So again, I don't know that we would have a verbatim transcript in any way, because that's not the direction we've gone. Are there any other comments? Or yes, Trustee Chamberlain.
I had a question.
Yes.
What happens if the minutes are not passed is number one. That's a question for our village attorney. And then number two, if these minutes represent something that's more summary than the other minutes, is that an approval? An appropriate approval?
Well, are the minutes in the
Really-
appropriate form if they're in the summary form of what was said? Is that one of your questions?
Essentially.
Okay. I'll leave that to you, counsel. I'm not sure I need to render an opinion. I probably will anyway, knowing me, but.
Yes, that was a village attorney question.
The requirement is that the minutes capture the gist of what was said, the important, not verbatim by any means, but not when I say the gist of what was said, not the individual comments, but what was the discussion about, what was the nature of the discussion. Many communities do not go through that, and this person said this, and this person said this, and this person said this. You'll see a very short description. There was a discussion about this issue. So it's not, the level of detail that we have now is okay. It's consistent with what other communities do. We've gone back and forth over the years, but there's nothing that requires that we have minutes that are 8-10 pages long, like sometimes we used to.
And that's fine. However, the minutes that were originally published to be approved were more on the line of what you were saying we're not doing anymore. So this is probably not, in my opinion, this was a poor time to make the change. That's all I'm saying.
Noted. The clerk and I did make an effort, and that's why it was put out in bullet point form as to the points that were made. We thought it was the best way to capture the conversation and the important issues that were raised.
Okay.
Is there a way of putting in the minutes that the minutes may not be as detailed or as reflective as some board members might want?
Well,
So future doesn't rely on these minutes as being perfect?
well, see, this is where we get into it as to what do we want. And again, if the board wants to go to those extremely detailed minutes, we certainly can. We would have to go through a more formal process, and I would not recommend it for any number of reasons. I think this is a better way to go. As council noted, various other boards and committees that I'm on countywide do this. Recognize that as long as the minutes will support anything we do in general, it's better not to get into detail. The attorneys will all agree to that too, because we get the benefit of the doubt of having acted correctly. And as far as noting on these particular minutes, I think what we'd have to do is note in the minutes for this meeting about what we thought about those minutes, because the minutes in question are only supposed to be reflecting what was said at that particular meeting.
That would be fine, except we're missing a recording. If we had the recording, then I'd be less concerned. But the
I
only
understand,
thing we
Henry.
have is this.
I assure you, Henry, I wish I'd hit that button when I should have.
So then
Maybe
may I make a
help us.
comment that when the first meeting minutes came out, I had made some corrections, but I also had a note that said I wasn't certain about particular things and could Daphne check the minute, check the recording, and that's when I found out there wasn't a recording. So I did have additional comments for the first version.
What if we were simply to ask the village clerk to put a note under her signature at the end of the minutes that in brackets, this meeting was inadvertently not recorded and I was unable to go back and listen to comments. If you wanted just a small note like that, I don't think it has any legal
That would be
significance.
good.
That could be done. And I think that would comply. And Daphne nodded her head over here. I could tell. I don't know how well it showed on the screen, so Is there any other discussion? If not, I would like to have a roll call, please, on the motion to approve.
Trustee Chamberlain.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein.
Aye.
Trustee Haber.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Nay.
Okay, that is a 5-1 vote in favor of approval, Madam Clerk. Is that correct?
Yes, 5-1, approving the 5-5 BOT minutes.
All right. Then I need a motion for the approval of the June 2nd, 2020 board minutes. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none.
I sent Daphne a correction late tonight.
Yes.
Daphne, did you see that?
No, I did not see it.
All right, we can talk about it if you like, but at the end of on page 18 of 147, it says Trustee Haber noted Deerfield Road between Portwine and Sanders is in deplorable condition. It was referencing the bike path or the pedestrian walkway between Portwine and Saunders. It was not referencing the street itself.
And I think that's accurate. The movements accept that change. I see one. nod.
Yes.
Yes, all right. Any other points or comments? All right, then, may I have the roll call, please, for approval of minutes?
Trustee Chamberlain.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein.
Abstain.
Trustee Haber.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Okay, so that is 5 approve, 1 abstain for Board of Trustee 6-2 minutes.
Thank you. Village ecologist report. I don't believe he is on this evening. Treasurer's report. Hal, you're out there somewhere? As I know the treasurer asked for the link and answered that he would be appearing. Mr. Clayton, do you have anything you'd like to add? And we'll assume that the treasurer will get in later.
Sure, just a couple things. One is that the cash summary report that was in the packet does not reflect the transfer from the general fund into the capital fund. So that's still apparently being worked on. I wasn't able to get an answer on that before the meeting. The second thing is that in the summary of revenue and expenses, which if you plow through all the detail, which I don't think the board normally gets, at the very end on page 59 is the summary of revenue and expenses. And I believe the right-hand column has data in there that doesn't seem to make much sense. But the important thing is that we're running at this particular point about as expected, given the taking into account the issues that we have with COVID and the sales tax and so on and so forth. I have an exhibit here which I can show you on the sales tax, or I can mail it out after the meeting on the sales tax over the last 3 years. And you can see that we've been operating at kind of a steady state, lower level since July of last year. And now in May and June, we've started to see the decline. We've gotten June receipts on the sales tax, but that reflects April collections. So we should see the decline continue for the foreseeable future. It's right now not as much as we had leveraged into our forecast, but it's getting close. The other thing is we do have the memo from the IML about state distributions, and once that clarifies a little bit and we get a little bit more of the sales tax history, particularly after the end of June when we can have a full half year results, we might be in a position to update the forecast. At this particular point, it looks like the forecast we have is what is happening.
Your mic's not on, John.
I was trying to click it. I was off. Sorry. Yes, Trustee Chamberlain.
Whoa. You said Trustee Chamberlain. Do you mean Trustee Jamerson or Trustee Chamberlain?
Trustee Chamberlain was.
No, I was trying to do the,
Okay.
press the
I
space
can tell
bar and
you
it wasn't
apart.
working.
Here.
I had two questions. One, I just wondered generally, are the SSAs as we expect? And I think that they are. But I noticed for the revenue for mostly water, but some sewer, that the revenues aren't as high as we expected. And I'm wondering, and I had asked the mayor about this, for my water sewer bill, last month I did not receive it. So I didn't pay it. I should have known, but I didn't. So I paid both this time. And I'm wondering if that happened with other residents, and perhaps that's what's reflected in the revenue being down on the water and the sewer.
The revenue being down is more a matter of lawn sprinkling. It's been so wet, nobody's been able to find their lawn to sprinkle it or have any idea of doing that. So remember, our revenue always tracks behind on this because it's a summertime. That's when we make most of our money. And we spend it as we buy it and collect it after the fact.
So, but it doesn't seem to be tracking. So maybe we should check on that.
Oh, we'll check on it anyway, Cheryl. If you didn't get it, I want to make sure you were the only one who didn't for whatever reason.
Yeah, no, but I meant as far as revenues, and if other people didn't get it, that would explain it.
Right, and I'm saying that.
But the revenues are down significantly enough that it's worth questioning.
And certainly we'll look at it, but normally when we have a wet season, our revenues are down because so much of that is sprinkling, and it comes in after the fact. Hopefully we'll make it up in August when we have a drought with the weather being what it's been.
Just to give a little bit more detail, the municipal sales tax through the receipts in June year to date is about 132,000. We budgeted about 157,000, so we're about $26,000 below budget, which again is about where we expected to be at this point.
Good news, spending is down. Yes, Rick?
I have two questions. One is about the report itself. And Mike, maybe you can clarify this. Where it says current budget, current actual, that's the current month?
Correct.
Okay. And then the question I had was about snow removal. It says year-to-date actual is $80,000 and the annual budget is $65,000. Is part of that year-to-date actual for next winter?
That was actual from last winter. It was when we had the heavy snow in December, we didn't get the bills till later, and I had Rob check to make sure that the bills were legitimate, because I saw that too. It jumped out because we didn't have that much in that part of the latter part.
But if any bills come in December, that's part of the budget. The $65,000 would cover any bills that come in December.
It's still out there. Yes, we still have November, December.
I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. And then the last question I have is probably towards Pat Glenn. Can the MFT funds be used for snow removal, or is that strictly a village expense?
No, snow removal, snow and ice control is an MFT eligible cost.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the treasurer's report? I know, again, Hal was going to talk with us about Chase. And Hal, have you made it on by any chance? No, okay. Moving forward, engineer's report.
I do have a report this time. So of course, as many of you know, we had a water main break on Palmer Court. It happened sometime either Sunday night or Monday morning. The water main blew out vigorously enough to actually damage a 2-inch gas main that was adjacent to it. So we had a simultaneous water main break and gas leak repair. North Shore Gas and Lake County Public Works were both mobilized out and had both shut down by 10:30 in the morning. And both were back up and in service by about 1:30 in the afternoon. We did issue a boil order for the folks along Palmer Lane and a few people south on Lindale Lane and west on Daiquiri, just because the main was depressurized. So we did issue a boil order just until we got a satisfactory sample back from the lab, which we got today. So we were able to lift the boil order. Generally speaking, the main break doesn't seem to be indicative of any significant, system issues in Thorngate. It was very localized, and the pipe nearby looked like it was in good shape. We see this from time to time in a number of villages, just where for some reason just a very localized spot of the main, particularly with ductile iron, blows out. But I don't think there's any cause for concern that a big water main replacement project is necessary in Thorngate.
I can tell you when it happened. It happened at approximately 6:45 Monday morning, because it's directly at the end of my driveway. So there was a geyser shooting up. It was about a 3-foot geyser. And it was interesting because as the water was shut down and went lower with the geyser, then the gas started coming out more, and the fire department was about to evacuate everyone. So it was a fun morning, to say the very least. But everyone did a good job of mobilizing the fire department. We had the police on site, et cetera. So I can speak for the local residents. They were very appreciative of how things were handled.
Then the other report item I have is just to touch briefly on the discussion of the paths on Deerfield Road and Riverwoods Road. Despite my appearance to the contrary, I went out last week and walked the entirety of both paths.
He didn't have a beard when he started.
I could use the steps. The path certainly has deteriorated pretty significantly. The last time the village did any significant patching on the path was 2016. We put that in with the contract for Port Wine Road and pretty successfully got some pretty aggressive pricing for it. As it, if you contract for the bike path alone, you're going to see some pretty high numbers, because it's pretty fussy work to park a truck on the road, and then you have to bobcat the hot mix in, all the pavement that you take out, you have to bobcat back out. So it's not ideal work from the contractor's perspective, but there is a lot of alligator pavement, a couple few potholes. The space between the back of curb and the path, as you get farther east towards Saunders, is in really bad condition. It's gone essentially. So my recommendation is, and of course the vegetation is really grown up around there. We send the landscapers out every year to trim back branches and brush that interfere with the path, but we've never really, at least in my tenure, addressed all the vegetation at the ground level. Basically, there's a lot of places where the grass has slowly encroached over the edge of the path, and there's areas where it's probably not even 3 feet wide because of all the vegetation. So I'll distill this all in a report for the board, but my recommendation is going to be that first we get out, we clear the vegetation a little more vigorously this year than we have in the past, to try and get some of that ground level vegetation cleared back from the edge of the path, and then do some limited patching and shoulder work essentially between the back of curb and the path. That's the one area, again, between Big Oak and Saunders, where it is pretty dangerous for a pedestrian. There's a pretty fair drop off on the edge of the path. I don't dispute at all Trustee Haber's assessment of the pavement being deplorable. I would say that it is deplorable. It's not particularly dangerous to a pedestrian. I don't think anybody should be riding a bicycle on particularly Deerfield Road. That path never met, bike path design standards. I do recommend that I contact the county and ask them to take down the bike path signs. They have signs at Portwine and Forest Glen, directing people to ride bikes on that path, which I don't think is a very good idea. And then we can contract for the work we want to do besides removing the vegetation. My suggestion would be that we contract with that along with Kingswood Court, just to try to get a little bit of economy of scale for the work that we want to do on the path. And that's all I've got.
Question.
Yes.
Trustee Chamberlain?
Do I remember correctly that it was Lake County that put the yellow entrance to each one of the paths with the, I'm not sure what it's called, but it's got little humps in it?
The detectable warning, yes. The county, I know they put the one at Thorn Meadow on the east and west sides of Thorn Meadow when they did the bike path over the river. And then they replaced a lot of them that we had installed on the northeast side of Riverwoods Road. And then for some inexplicable reason, they also put one at Hiawatha,
Right.
where the path it's generous to call it ruins of a path at that location. It is completely inscrutable and grown over, but nonetheless, somebody at the county saw enough of a path to put a detectable warning.
Right. I think I'm not quite sure what we do about it at this point, but it certainly sends a mixed message to folks because, as you say, those paths were really not intended for bicycles. They're safety paths, and when you have a path that is truly falling apart, the one near Hiawatha, but a clear entrance to it, it's a little bit confusing.
Yeah, and I can talk to the county to see if they'd be willing to take that one particular detectable warning out, or we could do that as part of our contract. But even more significantly, I think we should ask the county to take down the bicycle paths.
Mm-hmm. Right, because they're truly mislabeled.
Yes,
Well, it's on their maps too, which is not good.
Well, and the detectable warning, Pat, correct me if I'm incorrect, is really for pedestrians. It's not for bicycles. It's it's an ADA requirement for pedestrians, correct?
Correct. And, so I don't think that the detectable warning in itself is necessarily, is a bad thing, but there is no path much beyond that detectable warning. I mean, you
Correct. It's the only thing. Well, so I actually used to use that, but now between the extra vegetation and the path continuing to fall apart, that one is one that I really wouldn't want anyone using.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that we remove the vegetation from that
Right.
one. I think we're better off letting nature take its course there.
Right. Any questions for the engineer? All right, hearing none. Director of Community Services report.
Well, keeping with the county theme, as you're probably aware, the county doesn't mow Riverwoods Road right away very often. It's hard to get them out, but they did agree to clear the sidelines for the streets that intersect it. So it makes turning movements easier now. So a couple of residents did complain about that. Also, Sweet Basil is approved. The final inspections have been passed by all different inspectors that went out. We're reconciling the accounting on the project and hope to go to occupancy soon. And that's all I have.
Could I ask, Rob, someone asked me about the high grass as you are traveling north on Portwine and turning left on Riverwoods Road. The mowing would include that as well?
Yeah, I believe that was also recently mowed.
Great, thank you.
Oh, and one more thing. I contacted the property management at the shops, and they have been mowing the grass, and some folks may appreciate that, but that is prairie grass. So I asked the manager to bring it back to the way it was intended and to let it grow. There are other problems with that pond, loose garbage. There's a fence section behind that that's come down, so I've had them asked the manager to correct all that, but that grass is intended to be prairie grass and tall and unmowed. And that's all I have.
Yes, and in case you have gone by and noticed, we have had a couple of complaints from Meadow Lake. The pond is rather atrocious looking with pond scum, etc. So hopefully they will get on to that. We'll talk with the ecologist about how to handle it. Any questions for the Director of Community Services? Zoning Board has not met. I will say that if any of you have any suggestions for nominees to the Zoning Board of Appeals, I would be very willing to entertain them. We are 2 members short at this point. So if you have any suggestions, please forward them along. Plan Commission report.
No report yet this month.
Police report.
The police activity since the last meeting for the year to date is in your board packet. Additionally, the Lake County ETSB has ordered 6 Starcom radios for us. We originally budgeted $37,000 in a capital expense to purchase the radios, but we will not need to expend that now. We're currently looking at body cameras for our officers, and after I complete some more research, I'll probably be bringing a proposal to the board soon, which should be well below the $37,000 that we had budgeted for the radios. That's all I have.
Any questions for the chief? Okay, hearing none, village attorney's report.
We have been getting some notices, we the village, that we should be filing an update to the affordable housing plan that the village submitted to the state in 2005. And some of you weren't around when we prepared that. At the time we prepared the report, we were a non-home rule community. Subsequently, in 2006, we became a home rule community. The act that the report is required by became law in 2003 or 4, so it hadn't been around very long. A number of home rule communities took the position that the act did not expressly preempt home rule and didn't say that it regulated home rule communities. And so some communities on the home rule side continued to file updates and compliance reports, and some did not. I noticed just the other day looking around that Highland Park has. At any event, when the board looked at this in 2005, we were non-home rule, so it wasn't really an issue. Subsequently, we didn't have much news to report, and we haven't done much. The state has written us letters saying, we think you should comply. This has never been determined by any court of law that I know. But in prior boards and discussions, we took the position that it was a worthy enough goal. It didn't hurt to try and formulate a plan to see what we could do. And so we have a report on file with the state, but it's old. So I looked at it, I went through it. The report has to have at least 4 sections that are mandated by the state law. Those 4 sections ask you to say what percentage of your units are currently affordable under the state guidelines, and they put out a list. The last list that the state put out was in 2018, I think. On the non-exempt communities, we were on the list, and it showed that we had 5.7% of our units being affordable. They showed a total of 1,248 units in the village, I think of which 71 were deemed affordable. Don't know exactly how they got those numbers. We've always suspected that some of the units at the skilled care facility that used to be Brentwood and now it's called Elevate might have gone into the mix. Maybe there are some rental units, houses that are rented. We don't really know. And, you know, it may not be, I don't know that they have, exact count. They don't have census workers necessarily doing it. But anyway, the current report from the state is that 5.7% of our housing units meet the affordable requirements. And the goal is to have a higher percentage than that. When we filed our plan, we were given the choice, and that's still the choice today, of choosing among 3 different goals. And the goal that we chose, because it was the one that we thought most attainable, at least something we could actually work toward, was to have 15% of new developed units, housing units in the village, be affordable. The Act does not have any particular funding mechanism. It doesn't have any means of assisting municipalities. It's a one-size-fits-all. So when we prepared our report, we explained that we have very little land. It's almost all built up. Most of our land is severely constrained by natural environment and conditions, wetlands, woods, predominantly single-family houses that are trying to be, light on the land. And we didn't really have any more land to grow into. We identified a couple of potential annexation areas over on Milwaukee Avenue, and to have a chart that showed approximately how many undeveloped lots there are in the village that just haven't been built on or that are empty and could be built on. Pat Glenn and I were talking today. We updated the chart. I don't know if you remember, Pat. I think there were probably 10 or 12, or was it maybe a little higher, 15 undeveloped lots in the entire village that could still be built on.
Yeah.
For purposes of reaching 15% of the new units being affordable, the law does not count tear downs and replacements. So really the only available way for us to try and improve the ratio on this measure is that the new homes that are constructed on lots that are empty at the moment would somehow become, at least a percentage of them would become affordable. Since the prices of the lots and the homes are set by the market, we're very constrained because the affordability numbers that are used, the income and the amount that could be paid for residents is probably about 1/3 of the cost of a lot in Riverwoods. So, and we explained this in the 2005 report. Oddly enough, our percentage of affordable units from 2005 to 2020, or to this 2018 report that IDA, that's the Illinois Housing Development Agency, put together, went up. We were at 1.9% and now we're at 5.7%. But that's really just an anomaly how they must have identified and counted units. So I have been looking at our plan from 2005. I have thought that what we could do possibly is simply update it, preserve, I would say, half of the discussion in there because I think it's still true and still relevant, and simply update a few of the charts. The main areas we identified in the old plan as potential for redevelopment that could yield some new housing units were the site that's now occupied by the police station and the lots on County Road, which we now know are full of wetlands and high quality wetlands and very unlikely to ever be developed. So none of the sites that we identified in 2005 could lead to that. On the other hand, in 2005, we pointed out there was the 37-acre parcel in Milwaukee, but we said it was slated for commercial development and could not help us fulfill the goal. The comprehensive plan update recently approved mentioned the 37-acre parcel as potentially an area of mixed use, including multifamily. You know, we've been looking at some proposals from developers for that. So if we were to update the plan, the affordable housing plan, I think we pivot away from the 2 sites we identified that are clearly no longer available and just point out that we have updated our comprehensive plan. There is an area that could come into the village, can't really control that to some extent, and the area could yield new housing units, and we would certainly attempt to use the affordable housing goal in measuring what we do if new housing comes in at that area. So that's sort of the outlines of how I think we can reasonably and quickly update the plan. And I just wanted to give the board that kind of overview and see if you had any thoughts or comments or questions.
Henry.
The comprehensive plan does specifically state that the developments should include affordable housing units. So that was put in the 5-year plan, that the term affordable housing.
Yeah.
And the developers that have talked with us about going there have been amenable to affordable housing as well. So all of this does fit. Are there any other questions, comments? Then we'll move forward with putting together the report along the lines council described. Anything else, council?
No.
Oh, that's it? Okay. That's enough. Okay, information items from the president. As I mentioned, Senate Bill 2135 was signed Monday. We're going into effect immediately, which gives us, rather than just operating under the emergency order, which amended the Open Meetings Act, the ability to conduct these meetings electronically and still maintain a quorum by electronic means. I sent to the board in your packet an outline from the Illinois Municipal League that gives you some of the basic items. I had originally been told that we were required to allow 10 people in from the public, but there's nothing in the act that actually says that I could find. We'll check it more closely. So we'll see. As I said earlier, it does require that I or some other village official be present here. The good news is, in normal circumstances, it does allow a broader travel ability and still participate for board members. So I think that will be something we will take advantage of in the future. Again, we'll have to explore the law a little more detail. It's only 48 pages of amendments, so I'm sure it's going to be something Bruce has memorized almost by now. COVID-19, we're still in phase 3. We are on track for all the measurables that we should be going into phase 4, approximately the 28th of the month. That still doesn't get us to where everything's back to normal, but we go to groups of 50, etc. And hopefully restaurants will be opened, etc. So life will be a little more normal. Finally, the work on the Flatwood Heritage Center campus plan has begun. If you came by the Village Hall, you would see that some of the bushes and landscaping that had been just north of the building has been replanted. So that work has begun. We hope that, or we're planning, I should say, hope is too vague a word, to make sure that this is done in time that we can use the parking and the facilities for the Halloween party in October. Maybe I'm being too optimistic and thinking we'll be in phase 5 by then and can actually have a Halloween party, but we're planning for one in any event. Something I didn't note, we have 2 new employees. I think all of you know that Megan is no longer with us, and our utility clerk also retired, and Joanne DeLoss is moving to South Carolina. So we were rather short people. We have hired a new building coordinator, and we've hired a new executive assistant. Joanne will be working remotely for a little while she is in South Carolina because she's leaving the end of the month, but she will be assisting people at a distance. So we should be able to keep things moving here. I think we've got some pretty good people. The new hires are all part-time for probationary period, then we'll determine whether they should go on to more hours or not. But we went through some fairly formal advertising, and again, I think we got some very, very good candidates here. So if and when you ever can stop by or feel comfortable stopping by, because I know some of you are more concerned, do stop in and say hello and meet Vivian Hofeld, which is the new building department coordinator, and Katie Brown, who is from Deerfield, so we have another close person at least, who is the new executive assistant. And, you know, I should have given Rick a chance if he wanted to say anything about the campus plan, since he is honchoing that, but I'm not sure there's a whole lot more to say. Rick, you want to add anything?
Well, we just had our pre-construction meeting last week, and you know, we're moving ahead. So, I mean, there'll be more work that's more visible coming up shortly.
No. Okay, then moving on, visitors wishing to address the board. We did not receive any emails. Next item on the agenda is approval of bills. Do I have a motion for the approval of bills?
So moved.
Do I have a second? Okay, I appreciate everybody making the effort to be able to see and check their bills, talking with our accountants. We may be able to use Adobe Sign to do this, where you'll get the packet. It's a controlled packet when you get it, so I don't have to worry about whether things go in and out of it. Your signature is there, and there's actually an audit trail that follows it. So that may facilitate the giving of bills to you in electronic form, so that you don't have to come in or sign them when you come in that night. So having said that, are there any questions or comments? Yes, Trustee Chamberlain.
I had several questions. Wendy sent me the bills. I had the questions go back to her, and I got some answers back from Susie. And most of my questions were answered or corrections were made, but there were two things that were ordered that I told Susie that I wanted whomever ordered them to sign off, but I was otherwise okay with that. Okay. And I know it was our practice in the past, and I'm not quite sure who did order them, but I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, well, I'll make sure that we get back to that. Anybody on the staff who's involved should be initialing it before a trustee is asked to, so that you know that it's been viewed by staff. Any other questions? If not, roll call, please. Roll call vote.
Trustee Chamberlain?
Aye.
Trustee Clayton?
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein?
Aye.
Trustee Haber?
Aye.
Trustee Hollander?
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Moving on to action items. The first item is the awarding of the water service contract. You've seen the two proposals, one from Swanson, who has been doing the work, one from Gowalt Hamilton, who is moving into that area. I asked Trustee Clayton to take a look at the numbers, and he came out where the incumbent Swanson is slightly $4,000 less expensive. Yes?
Just that data that report was generated a month ago.
Yes.
And I think subsequent information has come to the point where when we're comparing apples to apples, we're probably closer to $2,000 difference at this point.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you for doing the analysis in the first place, because it is kind of hard to get all the apples. It's also difficult because obviously the person who knows the most about the work actually being done that normally advises us is the village engineer, who is actually one of the bidders. I do know from what I have observed that while I think both would be good, I think we would be better to go with Gowald Hamilton. I think there was a better plan for maintenance, something that I know we've asked to be included in part of this. And again, either will do a good job. I just happen to think and recommend to the board that we would go with Gowald Hamilton. I think it's a better choice. Mike?
Also, I think it's important to note that Swanson is undergoing, or at least in their letter said they were undergoing a management change at this particular point. So we really don't know. It kind of clouds the future a little bit with regard to whether whatever level of services we're getting within the scope that we have outlined are going to continue at the same level. And even if they do continue at the same level, there's at least enough documentation to indicate that there's been several issues that have come up over time that under different circumstances, if we had a little bit more of a proactive approach to the situation, that we might have avoided some issues. So I'm personally, although it wasn't very clear from the report that I issued, I just wanted to make it clear to the board that I'm recommending that we choose Gowald Hamilton.
So are there any, yes, Henry?
When I read this, at least it implied that there were services that should have been done by Swanson that either weren't done or that were not part of the old contract that are now required. Is my impression wrong on that?
No. And I will say that there were reports that were done and were not done properly. We had to then follow action for the EPA, send out notices to everybody about drinking water. Not that there was a problem, just the reporting was not done properly. And that was taken over by Gowald.
All right, to me that's significant. But my second question is, the way that Swanson was charging was the $75 per hour, and then the materials were at cost. And Gowald Hamilton is using a different method. So my question to Mike is, was this apples to apples? Because I wasn't able to make a comparison between a fixed $75 per hour versus the way that Gowald Hamilton was charging.
Okay, we made every effort to make it as close to apples as possible. Right now, we're paying Swanson a big chunk, and then those numbers I'll get to in a minute. And we're also paying Gowald Hamilton $4,000 a year. Now, though, the sum of the big chunk we're paying Swanson plus the $4,000 is what compares to the bid that we have from Gowald Hamilton of $84,000. So let me get back to then. Swanson's, the year to year, in 2017, the Swanson bill was $83,700. So when you add that $4,000 to that, we'd be at 87 or 88, and that would be well above the Gowald Hamilton bid. In 2018, they charged us $77,000, $78,000. When you add the $4,000, then they're at 82. So they're roughly $2,000 under the bid from Gowald Hamilton. This year, when we extrapolated the information, it looked like they were going to come in at about $76,000, but I think there's some seasonality in there, and we have some concerns about the level of service. So when you add the two together with the $4,000, the best we can do, because they bill on an hourly rate, is to assume the history and what we've seen so far this year. We get to about $82,000. The Gowald Hamilton bid is about $84,000. So we're within spitting distance of each other. And I think given the circumstances and the level of service, that's why I recommend we go with Gowald.
And I would again just second what Mike said. I couldn't say it any more clearly. Cheryl, you're still on. Rick, do you still want to speak?
Yeah.
Okay, and I see you, Eric. Okay.
I had two questions on the Gowald Hamilton bid. Under additional services number 9, it added utility payments, and I wondered exactly what that meant, first of all.
That would be, you know, the electric bill at the reservoir, which just goes to the village. So let me get it in front of me here. Right, so we're saying that's not included. The electric bill would continue to be paid by the village as it is today.
Okay, okay. Then the other question, you had a section where it's essentially compensation for services where you list prices for different things. My question is, have we been doing those things in the past? Okay, I see the mayor shaking his head.
No.
Okay, so we haven't been doing those things in the past, but I suspect that you are now recommending that we do those things.
Yeah, I would say at best it's been hit or miss in the past. As I noted, the last time the village did hydrant flushing and valve exercising, that was back in 2016, and it was our firm that coordinated those vendors to go out and do that work.
That's what I remember.
And part of it, Cheryl, Trustee Jamerson had pointed out that we didn't seem to have a maintenance program.
Well, that's exactly
So
what
that's
I was
part of
going, but that's what I was getting to.
Yes, and we've had no clear statement of any ongoing, I should say, not foregoing, ongoing maintenance. And that alone is another reason why I think we would be better served with Gowald Hamilton.
Right. What I took from the bid was that we hadn't been doing regular maintenance and we should.
Yes, Trustee Jamerson, and then I'll get up to you, Eric.
I just want to make sure that the $4,000 that Gowald was charging us to coordinate with Swanson, they're not going to charge us to coordinate with themselves. I'm just making an assumption, but
That's included in the.
I just want to make sure I'm on the same page.
Well, we got to watch that guy. Eric?
Sorry, somebody was leaving the house. Okay, I just I don't think it's a concern, but with Gowald Hamilton being our engineer, is there any negative impact with the further lack of diversification from companies servicing our village? I just wanted to throw it out there. I don't think there are, but can there be?
Well, I know it's a whole new division, so it's not exactly the same, but Gowald Hamilton has always been closely involved with Swanson anyway, so I'm not sure how much we're losing diversification other than exact workers on site, perhaps. But that's a hard one to say. And again, we can always go back somewhere else. If there are plenty of water contractors and engineers out there, I think. Are there other questions? Yes, Rick.
I have one more question. Swanson does all of our plumbing inspections as well on the building side?
No.
Oh, that's Murney.
That's
Mike Duran.
Sorry.
Yeah. It's okay.
Mine.
Yeah, I went through that too. Well, are there any other questions? If not, I need a motion to approve one of the other bids or proposals.
We approve the Gowald Hamilton bid.
Second.
Okay, and would you include in that the value of the contract?
If I could pull it up, I would.
Mr. Haber, are you just ready to vote, or would you want to comment?
No, I'm ready to vote.
Okay. I think it was a base bid of 84,000 with extras up to a total of approximately 104. Does that sound right, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So any further questions? Hearing not, roll call, please.
Trustee Chamberlain?
Aye.
Trustee Clayton?
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein?
Aye.
Trustee Haber?
Aye.
Trustee Hellinger?
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Water is still on the agenda. Next, we have a request for the reduction of the water tap-on fee for the car wash being located at 777 Saunders. Mr. Glenn, can you, now that you're hired for other things, give us a recitation of where that is, and then we'll ask the petitioner to address the board.
Yes, so by our code, a new water connection, the connection fee for commercial property is $7,000 per residential equivalent. In other words, for commercial properties, The engineers calculate essentially how many houses that commercial property is equivalent to, and then it's $7,000 per each. This property was never connected to Riverwood's water. It of course was in Deerfield before it was developed and now proposed to connect to the village system. So there was no pre-existing connection. And also, per our code, because all Riverwood's customers pay sewer connection fees to the county, by village code, the village simply relies on Lake County Public Works to determine the number of residential equivalents. And then we just do our calculation of $7,000 times that number of residential equivalents. So the county initially, the county's gone through several iterations of their calculation for residential equivalents. Based on their initial calculation, the Riverwoods water connection fee was almost $83,000. Based on the county's current calculation, it is just a shade over $48,000. And I think that's the engineering background on it.
All right, and Mr. Abbott and I believe his engineer or architect have requested some type of relief from the village, in that obviously that's a significant amount of money for anyone trying to develop a business anytime, and especially now. But let me turn it over to Mr. Abbott and anyone he would like to speak on his behalf.
Hi, Mr. Mayor and all the Board of Trustees, good evening. And my name is Anil Abbott, and I'm speaking regarding for the car wash. We're going to have planned to open it this month, but we hoping is trustees and Mr. Mayor help us to, because it's a cost of our, for whole construction is, around 800,000, and I'm paying like before, 89,000 sewer connection fees to go down to 39,000, and still they're using for the water uses, but water uses we're not gonna use more than 1,000 gallons per day if I'm running the 100 car per day. But I was still talking to them, but they go to down 39,000, and the base of sewer connection to water connection go Mr. Pat Glenn $48,160. So that's our cost of construction together is like more than 11% of cost of our construction. And it's really, really tough for us this time. And then it's very hard to get the loan from bank. And then we just requesting to your Board of Trustees to help us out to start a small business in this, our Riverwoods. And I'm Riverwoods resident, and then I really need help from our trustees. I know the water connection is already in our building for 777 by our construction of Cafe Dioro 2175. But I totally understand, Mr. Pat Glenn explained me, but our 2175 is, I'm the owner of this property, and we already paid for the water tap fees for that by the bank, we bought from the bank. But I need your help, and we have advice, anything, how we can reduce our cost. And I try my best to the county, and then spoke to the supervisor, and they help me out. But still they're using the water gallon I'm not using that one, but I show them to example for how we use this amount, but they're using their own template or examples for the count of the gallon. And I just need your help and advice, and then so we can start our business.
Well, let me point out so you understand that while you do have the water going to the other business, the tap-on fee is not actually the cost of tapping on per se. This is a way of getting back some of the capital that has previously been invested in water mains, reservoirs, pumps, etc., that are already there, and it's a proportional share based upon the residential equivalents. So just because the water is available there doesn't mean that it's a new use. And so that's what the water fee tap on is about, is to cover that overhead.
I totally agree with you, Mr. Mayor. The reason for, and we're not using this kind of gallon, and then I don't know how we can spend. And I sent email to them, to Mr. Pat Glenn and the county. Now we need your help to how we can, you know, reduce our bill. It's really a lot of cost for me for build this building to, you know, and then the cost like 11-12% going right now from the village, and plus the top up is all another permit fees and everything, you know. It's a small piece of property for reopening, and I don't know this in future is really, and we work hard. We, you know, how much we can make money in the car wash. This is really challenging for me this time. And then, you know, this is another thing is we have 2020 is really bad, and I was wondering, and we invested this money, and then but you know, we're hoping is not lose money or not closing business, but we need help to reduce our expenses in the beginning so then we can survive.
Trustee Haber, you had a question or comment?
Right. I was wondering if Pat has any idea as to what a typical car wash uses, or whether the applicant has given any of that specific information. I just did a little quick, you know, research, and it indicates that a typical car wash uses 35 gallons per car. And I don't know how many cars a day would go through a wash, but a lot of the assumptions show 100 cars a day approximately, which would be 3,500 gallons a day, which is far different than the 1,000 gallons that Mr. Abbott is indicating. So I just was wondering what you know about that.
Yeah, I do have a car wash, but I do have a touch-free car wash in my Palatine location. So the touch-free car wash and hand car wash is really like almost 30% or 40% consumption of the water. We use it for the hand car wash. Hand car wash, we have a control to stop the water. Whenever we need it, we can use it. And always you can check with any hand car wash, they're not using more than 10 gallon or 15 gallon per car wash. No more than 10 gallon. And then he's agree, Mr. Miles in the county, but he using his own example. And I told him, you can give me any example for any car wash. So they're using 30 gallon per car wash. Maximum is 10 gallon you can use per gallon for one car wash. And I'm using in the beginning, we sell 30 or 40 car per day. Weekend, I'm sure we can, assuming and we're hoping we can car wash like 100 car wash in a weekend or the winter time after the snow. That's the main, our business. In the weekdays is people is busy. They come to, you know, before you work, or sometimes they come in the lunchtime. The rest of the time, people is busy for car wash. Usually the weekend, and that's why I use the average is 100 car wash if I'm using in a weekend. So then I can survive in my, you know, financial things.
So the question was really directed for Pat Glenn. So I'm wondering if Pat has any comments on that.
Sure.
So I don't have a lot of direct experience with these sorts of car washes. You know, part of the reason that it's calculated based on square feet is it goes exactly to that. It is that it's a function of the operator's decisions on what sort of water conservation they use. And so the, you know, agencies tend to use you know, either the size of the water service or the square footage of the building to estimate the demand that the building's capable of putting on. That's the other thing to bear in mind, is it's not necessarily, you know, if you think of it in terms of how much infrastructure had to be put in place to allow this particular use to be able to draw that particular amount of water, whether they choose to or not, but just the infrastructure's in place to provide under, you know, on a hot day when the rest of the system's being taxed, we have enough capacity to also supply a car wash, you know, whether we supplied it 10 gallons per minute or 30 gallons per car, it's the cost of that infrastructure. I do have one suggestion, and Bruce is probably going to digitally kick me under the table. But if the board was amenable to it, and we did whatever was necessary just to grant an exception to what the code specifically says, perhaps we could arrive at an agreement where we charge some lesser amount, and we review, because he's going to be billed for his water usage. So, in some 6 months or a year, we'll have a record of what the actual water usage is, and we can use that to truth out the demand.
But the other question I have, Pat, is like, if Mr. Abbott decided to put in an automatic car wash system, first of all, could he do it under the current, zoning that we've given him, or special use that we've given him? Or if there was a different use that was ultimately approved for the property, would we then go back and determine whether or not the tap-on at the time was appropriate given a changed use? Or once the tap-on is done, it's done forever?
No, we would definitely go back and revisit it. That's what the county is doing right now. So the county, there was a house in Deerfield, it was connected to the sewer. So the county did their calculation of what the residential equivalent of the car wash was, and then they subtracted one for the previous house that was connected to the sewer.
Okay.
And so it is common for agencies or utilities to revisit the connection fees based on a change in use.
Pat, do you think the county would be amenable to adjusting it if we track the water and it's less, that they would lower their sewer fee as well if the equivalencies were lower?
I can't speak to the county. My guess is...
I know you can't promise it. I'm just asking from your experience, do they ever readjust the other way?
I doubt they do for, and Mr. Abbott, forgive me that I'm not, it's a lot of money for you and me, but at the county level, it's not a huge connection fee. If it was Discover or something like that had some enormous, hundreds of thousands of dollars, then maybe they would revisit it based on actual use. But I don't know where that threshold is for the county.
I will check with them, with the county, Mr. Miles, and then we'll see if it's, that's a good advice. I really appreciate, Mr. Mayor.
I'm assuming you're...
There we go. But Trustee Jamerson has a question, and Mr. Goldstein does as well.
So there's two fees involved here. If I'm reading the documentation correctly, there's the fee to the village for the water connection, but then there's also the fee to Lake County Public Works for the sewer connection. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
And our fee is based off of the equivalent uses that the county determines.
And what Mr. Abbott is requesting is that we see what we can do with our fee because we have no control over the county.
Correct.
Okay.
And I was just hoping that we could, if it did turn out lower, maybe we could help him as a local resident in business in trying to lower what the county gets, because that doesn't hurt us at all to get him to lower.
So in general, I'm always concerned about setting a precedent because the next person that might come down the road wanting to do a development will maybe cite this as a reason for why they should also get a reduction. However, given what's going on right now with the economy, I would not be opposed to doing something along the lines that Pat suggested, where we charge a lesser fee and then monitor it for a year or even 2 years, very similar to what we did with the left turn into the cafe.
Yes, yes.
Right? And then, if it turns out that it's really 6.88 residential equivalents, then eventually he's going to end up paying the rest of the fee. I wouldn't have a problem if we could work a situation.
Well, I think we could put a preamble referring to COVID and the stress on the economy, et cetera, and probably avoid some precedent. Mr. Goldstein, you had a question?
Yeah, it's more due to my own ignorance. So I was just curious, when was the infrastructure put into this location? And was the infrastructure put in to accommodate the type of water capacity, whether a car wash was built or not?
Okay, they don't have the water mains yet. The infrastructure we're talking about is our water mains, our reservoirs like at Thorngate, et cetera, where those on water have been paying for all of these capital improvements that allow the water system to work. And so I don't think there have been any improvements as far as the water lines going to this particular.
Well, John, I think his question, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your question was the existing main,
Right.
What's the capacity of the existing main? And was it based on a car wash? Was it based on a house? Was it based on some future?
Yeah, that's more in line with what I was asking. I was saying, when was it put in, and was it put in? I mean, if it was put in recently, I have no idea. Was it put in to accommodate the type of capacity that a car wash would require to be in business? Or has it always been there, and just so happens that it has enough capacity for a car wash? Does that make sense?
So there are two mains on Deerfield Road. The larger, the 12-inch main was installed as part of the Thorngate improvements, so mid-90s. And then the other 8-inch main that's out there, I believe was installed as part of, I don't think it was part of the Country Club Estates. I think it was installed as part of Deerfield's commercial development on that side of the expressway.
Got it. So there's no more infrastructure that needs to be built. It has already been there since the mid-90s.
Correct.
Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes, this will not overtax the system.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Cheryl, you'd had something at one point. Have yours been answered? Okay, anyone else from the board?
There was,
Yes, go ahead, Bruce.
Michael Haber asked whether an automated use could go on. Under the current zoning, it could not go in. The current special use specifies a hand car wash that allows for automated, some dryers, but not for an automated car wash, because that was the whole nature of the proposal. So it was intended to be a hand car wash.
Okay, so does someone want to make a motion? Rick, do you want to make a motion on your proposal?
Sure. I'll make a motion that we, well, I guess I'm not sure where the fee should go down to. Maybe Pat can chime in on what would be a reasonable starting point as
Well, if you accept the numbers that Anil has and multiply by $7 and then check whether the new numbers.
1,000 gallons a day is equivalent to 4 homes. One residential equivalent is 250 gallons per day.
Okay.
The 4 residential equivalents that Mr. Abbott suggests then would be a $28,000 connection fee.
So would we subtract the previously permitted 1 unit or not?
No, it wasn't connected. It was in Deerfield, so it was not.
Oh, okay, okay.
Water system.
Okay, well, so I'll make a motion that we make the residential equivalent equal to 4 for this property, and that for the next 2 years, we monitor on an annual basis the amount of water that is used and adjust the fee at the end of that second year to the correct amount.
It's reflected by the average of the 2 years or something?
Well, I would assume that after the second year, it would be pretty much a steady state at that point. That's why. And maybe we just do it after 2 years. I'm okay with that too. Matter of fact, I'll change that. We'll just after the second year, we will figure out what the usage has been for that second year and adjust it accordingly.
Sounds a little clearer and easier. Is there a second, Henry?
Second.
I would don't think we ought to let it go down. I think that would have to be the basement. In other words, if we're going to reduce it, that at the end of 2 years, for whatever reason, they don't have a lot of cars going through or something else, I would not want us to get lower than the original 28,000 or.
Okay, I mean, I'll agree to that.
That amendment, Cheryl? Do you accept that also? All right.
Yes.
All right, further discussion?
If I could, I would suggest that, and maybe it's already understood, that Bruce draft up an agreement just so that we can get all this in writing and.
Oh, yes.
Agreed.
You want to vote? Let's just make it the motion, then Bruce draft an agreement on those terms, and then we'll vote on that again, the agreement itself, when we have the specific agreement. You accept that amendment? Cheryl, yes. Okay.
Sure.
All right. The motion before the board is to direct council to draw up an agreement whereby the tap-on fee will be for residential units, and at the end of 2 years, we will adjust it upward to whatever might be appropriate based upon actual usage. Roll call, please.
Trustee Chamberlain.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein.
Aye.
Trustee Haber.
Aye.
Trustee Hollinger.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I have just a quick question. I appreciate for all the trustees and mayor to understand the situation. Really thank you so much, and Mr. Pat Klein also. And I was wondering, we got the all approval, from county and everything, and so is okay, like if everything is there, so we can get the permit and start in July? I can send you the county, and Mr. Pat Glenn get it soon, because I still hold it, the check, because Will's decision. And so still we able to, if we got everything and we get the permit to start our construction?
The site improvements, and I apologize, I thought I'd already approved, and I think my last letter just said all that was left was payment of the connection fee. And Rob, correct, jump in. I think you're done with the building, are you not?
I am.
So yeah, I think.
And we'll talk tomorrow. I'll go through where we left off, the status of the project, and all the other assorted permit fees and this and that, and we'll talk. All right.
Not a problem. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda, an ordinance proposing to amend ordinance number 11-10-21, which established Village of Riverwood Special Service Area number 22, and providing for a public hearing and other procedures. Council?
Well, as we've done so many times before, we're either proposing to form a special service area, or we're proposing to amend the terms under which one was formed. SSA 22 was formed, I think, in 2011. The ordinance that's referenced in the title was the establishing ordinance. The residents have been collecting a maintenance levy and building up an account, but after this many years, they realized that their maintenance levy is too low. This was one of the earlier versions of the road SSAs that we did. We started having more of them after this. And at that time, the idea of having an escalation clause in the SSAs wasn't as widespread. We had one or two, and this particular SSA elected not to have it. So the initial maintenance levy that they set upon back in 2011 is what they're still stuck with. So that's one issue. They'd like to increase the maximum annual levy that they're allowed to have. The other issue is that they have some work they need to do, which would probably best be funded with a bond issue, taking care of some storm sewer work and streets. And this ordinance proposes issuing bonds up to $170,000 with a maximum interest rate of 5%, a maximum maturity of 12 years for the bonds. Nothing else really changes materially in the establishing ordinance, it's a flat tax SSA. It has a special tax roll. It lists the PIN numbers. But under the state law, if we want to amend the terms under which the SSA was initially formed, we have to go through essentially the same process as when we formed it. So therefore, we adopt an ordinance tonight. We're asking for first and second readings because of the timing. We adopt an ordinance proposing the SSA amendment. We have to wait a prescribed period of time. This sets a date for a public hearing on August 18, 2 months away. That would give us a chance, hopefully, to, if we get past the hearing and get favorable petitions, to adopt an ordinance amending the SSA in early September, the first meeting maybe in September, and issue bonds as well. They want to try and get some of this done in the fall if they can. The timing issue, I think I mentioned, is that we have to wait 60 days under state law between the time we adopt the proposing ordinance and the time we have the hearing. So that's why we're asking for first and second reading tonight. I've been in touch with Mike and Chris Ford. They've been circulating emails to all of the residents in SSA 22. There seems to have been a lot of conversation. They were debating whether the bond amount should be lower or higher. I prepared a number of responses and explanations to make sure that they understood as best I could what the options are. And I think they've reached a consensus that the ordinance before you is consistent with their intent, what they'd like to try and get done.
And I've been fortunate or unfortunate enough to be privy to most of those emails that were flying around tonight. And truly, they seem to enter into a true consensus, if not unanimity, and I think unanimity on the amendment and the amount that they're looking for. So Mike Ford has done a lot of work, as has Chris, on this, and they're to be applauded for their work too.
I'll move to waive first reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Chamberlain.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein.
Aye.
Trustee Haber.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Do we have a motion for second reading and adoption?
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All right, we need a roll call on second reading and adoption of an ordinance proposing to amend number 11, excuse me, yes, ordinance number 11-10-12, which established the Village of Riverwood Special Area, Service Area number 22, and providing for other procedures and a public hearing. Roll call, please.
Trustee Chamberlain.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein.
Aye.
Trustee Haber.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Ordinance 200611.
Thank you.
Okay. Next on the agenda is approval of a temporary construction license agreement between Club Corp NVIX LLC, Club Corp LLC, and the Village of Riverwoods. This is to do with the water tower painting and basically gives us the ability to put the equipment off of the tower and onto the ground while the painting is going on. Is that correct, Council?
Yes, in order to paint the tower, the carriers have been contacted. Pat's been coordinating that. They have to put up a temporary monopole and then move the equipment onto the monopole. In order to do that, we had to find a place next to where the water tower is, but in the parking area, but not in the way for the club. And where we found, or where the contractor found the best place for this, lies outside of any of the current easements that we hold with the club to get to and from the water tower. So we put together a temporary construction license so that our actions would be authorized, and got Club Corp to sign off on it.
So do I hear any questions? If not, do I hear a motion to approve the temporary construction license agreement?
So moved.
A second. Cheryl, did you second? Did I see you're open? I didn't Somebody
I am
seconding?
open, but I think somebody else beat me to
I think it
that.
was Mike Clayton.
Okay, Mike Clayton, thank you. Further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Trustee Chamberlain.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein.
Aye.
Trustee Haber.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next, a resolution affirming fair housing laws in the Village of Riverwoods and directing resources to combat discrimination. This is in essence a reissuance and updating of a proclamation that we issued in 2016. We need this specific one for the OSLID grant. And frankly, all things being equal with what's going on in the country right now, I don't think it's a bad thing to do just in general. So I would hope that the board will approve the resolution. Are there any questions?
I move to approve the resolution.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Trustee Chamberlain.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein. Trustee Goldstein.
Eric, you're muted.
Aye.
Trustee Haber.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Resolution 200606.
For the record, the president would vote yes were the president to vote. All right, item F, program to help local businesses based on sales tax. That's a program Mr. Clayton put together, but there are a couple of questions that he needs to talk with our accountant, I think, and we need to roll through it just a little bit more before we bring that up this evening. He's done a lot of work. I frankly think it's a pretty good program, but we're going to continue it this evening. Then finally, we'll move to the Brushwood Riverwoods Partnership Program. Catherine put her picture up now, finally. So she's been waiting very patiently to join in the discussion this evening. The board may remember that I had mentioned some time ago that when we were going through the donation program, came up with the idea of trying to work with Brushwood on a number of joint programs in a cooperative basis rather than just donating money to people that work on good causes that we share the goals. Trustee Clayton was good enough to volunteer to work on trying to put some flesh on that, and he worked with Catherine. And they've got some pretty good ideas that they'd like to put forward. So let me turn it over to Trustee Clayton.
Okay, this proposal with Brushwood is really all about leveraging existing resources that we have already in the village so that we can supply some cost-effective services to our residents in the midst of the current situation and then thereafter. The material that was in the packet really laid out the rationale for the alliance and what Brushwood can bring to an alliance, what the village could bring to an alliance. I think the most important thing to emphasize here is that from Brushwood, we can get program conceptualization for experiential programs, and we can get staffing for developing and executing events, and we can leverage connections and contacts that we don't currently have within the village. And with that in mind, and thinking back to the fact that we're in the midst of really restaffing and reorganize our staffing, and that the board had requested in the past that we have a point place for village hall and campus programming, we've kind of developed what we think is a relationship outline and something that we can use to provide that need going forward. I think the obvious question is, why do it now? I think that we're in the midst of restaffing, as I said, and this will provide us some flexibility in terms of our planning. I think it's clear that our residents are looking for some programming and things to do, both during the COVID situation and then after, we can leverage the opening of the campus, and we can provide what I believe anyway to be physical and mental health benefits and something consistent with our branding and education program. There are some substitute costs that would be that we haven't undertaken that we could use to fund this, including the Easter egg hunt that was canceled. When we discussed this, we really looked at 3 different levels of cooperation. Those are laid out on the second page in the rationale document. At this point, I think we all agree that it's best to start out with sort of initial steps and see how things work out, and then kind of build from that. So what we're really asking for at this point is approval for the funding for level 1, which is $20,000. Also in the packet, we've laid out the program that we could envision for the next year that builds off of both the programs that are being undertaken at Brushwood, the programs that the village plans to undertake, and what the resident participation and benefit would be going forward. And I don't know, Catherine, if you have any comments you want to make about the programming.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to thank you, Trustee Clayton, and to the whole board for considering this. We're really excited about the potential for this partnership. You know, I don't need to tell you that the beautiful nature that permeates through Riverwoods is an extremely powerful community asset. And we hope that this partnership can really make that salient and accessible to the residents of Riverwoods. So the programming that we've laid out in the proposal, you know, we've really carefully paired it between Brushwood's existing plan for exhibitions and arts programming with the opportunities that the village already offers to residents to kind of help fill in some gaps for certain demographic groups, offering more programs for families, but also meeting the needs that you know, you all have identified and that your branding effort has identified in terms of people's strong interest and passion for nature, but also their desire to connect, to network, you know, to build community. And so the proposal, the programs that are in black outline what some of those could look like. Of course, because we are in the COVID-19 era, as it seems, we have been adapting many of our programs virtually. So that's exciting that, you know, we've kind of pivoted to that and been getting a lot of interest and excitement from people in that regard. But most of the programs are planned at this point to be in person, starting later in the year and then going into next year. Brushwood Center, as many of you probably already know, you know, our mission is to really promote the importance of nature through the arts and the health benefits of nature. So a lot of our focus is through arts programming, offering exhibitions, concerts, performances, but then also offering lectures and the opportunity for people to connect with thought leaders and luminaries who are really experts in the field and offer great insight for us in the community. So one piece that I wanted to highlight is our Smith Nature Symposium, which is typically in June, but has been postponed to October. And now we've actually turned it into a 3-month series of lectures and talks. It will culminate with the awarding of Bill McKibben and Sue Halpern, with Bill Curtis and Donna LaPietra as the Masters of Ceremonies. And that were, you know, in this package, including free passes, 30 free passes to village households for residents. But we also have a whole exciting lineup of programs, you know, in addition to the ones that are outlined in here that will be included in that. Everything from a focus on a program about flooding and the connections between too much water and public health, to thinking about the important role of renewable energy in our future and what what that looks like from a policy and from a resident perspective. So that's kind of the more intellectual piece, but we also want people to have fun. And we think that's a really important way for learning about nature and for connecting to it. So you'll see other programs in here, like collaboration with the Halloween party, doing a nocturnal animal activity, offering free passes for our film showing of with the One Earth Film Festival, and then a range of other more holiday focused activities that coincide with a nature theme. And we are always open to ideas and strive really carefully to meet the needs of the communities who we collaborate with. You know, we work with a lot of Riverwoods residents and families, and we know people are really excited about this programming. So we're enthusiastic about the opportunity to partner and really look forward to the potential.
There's also some, I would say some even more mundane, if you will, things like providing an article per newsletter with what you can do, things that have to do with planting a native garden and things that tie into our community garden and our victory garden program and so on and so forth. I'm personally very enthusiastic about the year that we've laid out here. I think we have some really good programs, and I think it comes in a very cost-effective and especially given our current financial situation, something that's really an efficient way for us to provide programming for the campus, things like the Trail Tales program and so on, programming at Village Hall and programming at the Brushwood facility. So I guess what we are asking for is approval of an alliance with Brushwood at level 1 as outlined in the document, which would entail a fund of $20,000.
Okay, first trustee Chamberlain and then trustee Goldstein. Carol?
Catherine, you haven't heard this yet, but I spoke briefly with trustee Clayton about an idea that came from the branding and education meeting. We had talked about what we could do, particularly this year, to take advantage of the different lifestyles that people are exhibiting and make up for things that they're missing out on. And one of those things was an idea of a nature walk where you're identifying plants and trees and things like that. And perhaps that's something that we could use the knowledge that Brushwood has and have a lovely social distance walk while, you know, people are out walking anyway, and now we can gather a bit more. So that might be something that we could do, because there are other things. And while the mayor is very optimistic about our regular Halloween plans, I'm thinking we're going to have to alter them. I know for sure we're not going to be able to do the some of the indoor events that we've had. So these could be kind of substitutions for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at Ryerson Woods, we've seen record attendance that may not surprise anyone who's been there recently, but the parking lots are like full. There's a lot of desire to be outside when so many of us need to be inside most of the time right now. So I think that's a really great idea to incorporate a hike or some kind of naturalist-led experience.
Trustee Goldstein, I think you were next, and then trustee Hollander.
Yeah, so I just have a couple questions and a comment. And it's mostly because I don't think I completely understand. So if all level 1, level 2, level 3, it's a total of $170,000. So I was curious to what time span or what time horizon this goes from. That's my first question. And if you're looking for a partnership that would entail $170,000 from the village, I would be curious to see what the total budget was for the Brushwood Center, and see how this fits in with your total budget. number 2. And then my third comment is, I know that Trustee Clayton thought this would be a great time to do this. And I kind of question whether this is the right time to do this. I think that we really should see how COVID-19 evolves, how the economy opens up. And if we're writing checks right now, for example, for $20,000, and there's a lot of experts who may think that COVID-19 is coming back, I don't know, maybe in October, November, I think maybe it may be premature to spend this money right now. And however, I will say I love the programming. I know my kids would enjoy doing this, but I'm not really sure the timing is correct.
I can address most of those questions, I think. So the level 1 is for 1 year of programming. So that covers the time span. It would be $20,000 for 1 year. And it's just a 1-year commitment right now. We're not committing to multiple years. Our total budget at Brushwood Center is about $500,000 annually. And, you know, in terms of the timing, you know, one of the things that we've seen from our virtual programs, from some of the other programs we're doing right now, like we've been doing a cloth mask drive since late March and distributing to healthcare centers and senior centers, is people are really looking for, even when things are closed down, you know, an opportunity to connect with others, to support their community, and especially for kids to have some stimulation and connection, you know, beyond the virtual learning, which is so challenging for us parents. So we can, you know, I completely understand, and I think that's a really valid consideration.
Mike, did you want to comment?
All I was going to say is we're not asking for level 2, level 3. We have no timetable for any of that. We want to test this relationship and make sure that it operates well and we're getting real benefit at the level 1, and level 1 could continue forever, or we could cut it off, or we could choose, we could have such a great experience that we could choose at any time to build.
For the lawyers in the group, we've used the word partnership, but that's not really what we're looking at, especially not right now.
I should be using the word alliance.
You after Henry.
Yeah.
So Henry, you were waiting?
Yeah, one of my questions was answered in that the 20,000 is for the year. When does the year start? And my second question is, when is the completion of the campus plan expected?
Well, supposedly the year starts starting in July, as far as this program is concerned. So it starts next month with the first programming and so on. And almost all of it is virtual until the campus is complete. The campus is supposed to be complete by Halloween. And that's our first program in which we operate outside of in a non-virtual situation. So we tie in directly with the first campus activity, which is the Halloween party, with a program.
Okay, Henry, you got everything answered? Okay, Mr. Haver?
I have a few questions. Number one, are there any other partnership agreements with any other any other villages? Is Lincolnshire a partner with Brushwood?
Lincolnshire is not a partner. No, they help to promote the events, you know, through their municipal communication systems, but they are not financially a partner, and we don't collaborate with them on programming. So this would really be exclusive to Riverwoods.
Okay. So it would be safe to say that we're the only ones who would be considering this type of affiliation.
Correct. Yeah.
And does Brushwood have any statistics on usage by Riverwoods residents?
I could pull those in our database, at least, of how many contacts are from Riverwoods. So, we've done a number of collaborations previously, and, you know, we advertise frequently, you know, in the village newsletter or different programs and offerings, and have received a lot of interest from folks. So
Catherine, you don't have any way you can track how many Riverwoods residents might use your trails or those areas? right? I know you might be able to say who was in the house, but
Yeah, we don't have a way of tracking, unfortunately, for the
Does Brushwood,
trails.
does Brushwood have a membership arrangement where a resident can become a member of Brushwood?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How many Riverwoods residents are members of Brushwood?
I can get that information for you.
Okay, I think we should get that information because I think we need to know what the utilization is currently to determine whether or not there is a strong demand in the village to affiliate with Brushwood. And then I also think that it would be appropriate, you know, I don't think that the campus plan was one that was, you know, overwhelmingly supported by the village. I think there were some that were very much in favor and some were not. I think this is a similar kind of a situation and an expansion of that plan, which we didn't have overwhelming support for. So I would be concerned about now, in effect, expanding it by having an affiliation. I think we should first, my opinion is we should first see what utilization is of the campus plan once the campus plan is completed before we start to do a participation arrangement with Brushwood. Also, I think I, for one, would like to see the actual agreement, if there is going to be one that we are going to sign off on, before, you know, I would feel comfortable voting in favor of any such affiliation. I'd like to know what the terms of that agreement are, what the commitments are specifically, numbers of hours of programming that is going to be provided to us. The presentation, while very interesting and sounds great, I think is vague on the specifics. And I think that I for one, if we're going to commit $20,000, want to see those specifics. I want to see what the actual commitment is, how much programming is going to be done, how many hours are going to be spent, what exactly is going to be accomplished before we just go forward with this. So those are my comments.
Mike, I would share your feeling that I think all of us, of course, would like to see in writing what we're actually committing each other to, and I'm sure Catherine would want to know that as well. And I do think it's not a bad idea to know how many people are active there now, et cetera. At the same time, though, I do think while we may debate how much this was all supported, there's always the leadership role of saying what we should emphasize and how to take advantage of it. You were one of the wise people who said that we should be working to make sure things happened on the campus now that we had it and had programs.
Yeah, but I also suggested that we might want to actually contemplate hiring someone to run the campus.
My new executive assistant.
$20,000 goes a long way toward actually funding, you know, someone who should do programming internally before we go outside.
It's also easier to fire Catherine than it might be to fire somebody on the staff too. No, not that I plan to fire you, Catherine, but it's easier to terminate that relationship, obviously. Mr. Clayton.
I would kind of disagree, I think, with the characterization of this program as an extension of the campus. I think the campus happens to provide an element that can be used within the context of this program. But a careful reading, I think, of the programs that have been laid out, and at least in my opinion, to a pretty high degree of specificity and detail, I think at this particular point, most of them don't specifically relate to the campus at all. They relate to other kinds of participation that that we're proposing to be engaged in. I think that at this particular point in time, we're trying to put together a program, and I certainly believe that I understand the need to look at the specifics of an agreement and before we actually authorize the spending of the money. But I would at least like to have a sense going forward that we have a program here that the board thinks is a good one and that we need to firm up the details a little bit. And finally, I know this, Trustee Haber, this is totally anecdotal, but I participated in a number of brushwood programs myself, and I would say that the level of participation of the Riverwoods residents is pretty high.
Well, that's something that we can work on, and hopefully Catherine's got some records. I'm not sure what they would be necessarily, but hopefully we can document that to some extent. I think rather than, yes, Mike, go ahead.
So, I mean, Mike has indicated that this is other type of participation, which is different than the campus plan. And I'm just wondering whether or not it is something that would not otherwise be provided by Brushwood that our residents couldn't participate in anyhow.
Right.
And specifically, you know, if they really felt like they wanted to participate in Brushwood, like if they want to participate in the Botanic Gardens, if they want to do something there, or if they want to go to the Arboretum or whatever, they can become members of these different facilities. And I don't know that we as a board should be making this determination without really understanding whether the village residents want this type of a program. You know, this is almost like, we don't have a park district, I get it. But you're now talking about basically creating specific activities that are going to be in affiliation with Brushwood. And the predicate to that has to be that there is some demand for that by the residents. That has to be the predicate. Otherwise, we shouldn't be spending any money on it. That was the predicate when we talked about the campus plan. Do the village residents want it? You know, that should be the predicate on this. And just to anecdotally say that a lot of the residents utilize Brushwood, I don't think is enough, because they can still utilize Brushwood. This is something on top of that, which we're saying that the village residents are going to get some benefit in addition to what is currently being provided by Brushwood, which may be exclusive to the village residents. And to do that, I think we need to know that the residents really want that before we just go ahead and spend the money to do it.
Henry, you've been waiting patiently. Let me let you jump in here.
Sort of as a takeoff on what Trustee Haber said, if I look at $20,000 and assume that you might be able to hire someone quarter time, the equivalent of an $80,000 salary per year, I'd rather spend the $20,000 hiring someone quarter time to take care of a lot of the intrinsic programs that we have around the village that require staff work that can do it exclusively. To me, that $20,000 can buy someone to oversee all these things we're going to be doing on the campus plan, the Halloween parties, even overseeing things you might want to have as private parties within the village when that becomes available. That's very specific Riverwoods, and we have much more control over it, although I understand it's another quarter-time person. But to me, that gives us more than requesting residents to go to Brushwood for a lot of these activities. I understand on level one, they mentioned educational seminars, concerts, book reading, films, lectures. The turnout for these things is relatively small for anything by our residents, for them to come to any event. And I don't know, I think that we have a need for someone to serve website use, party use, campus plan trailing programs. I just think that's a function that we don't do well because it's scattered among our present staff. And if you're gonna spend 20 grand, I'd rather spend it on a quarter-time person.
Rick, you were waiting, and then Mike, I'll get back to you.
So many things to touch on here.
That's why I gotta let all of you try to get something in here.
First of all, I think it would be hard for us to hire someone for $20,000 to do programming. I just don't think that's a realistic, I don't think that's realistic. I think that Brushwood and Catherine already have programming down pat. And if we're going to be doing programming, that would be a great place to have help. To Trustee Haber's comments, I don't even know where to begin. And I'm not even going to, I mean, I'm just, every time something comes up in front of this board, It's a, you know, I've never seen anybody on that, that facility. I've never seen this. I don't know why we did this. And
Try not to go to the direct like that, please. Don't make your arguments and your points. I understand.
my argument is that every
I
time.
don't mind, and I'm more than happy.
Mike, I don't want you jumping in either. I'm trying to keep some control. So please, and Rick, make your point. I understand.
My point is
Focus on the point, please.
My point is that the last meeting when we talked about the safety path or whatever we're calling it along Deerfield Road, and how one of the trustees walked it and said it was dangerous. My first opinion was, I never see anybody on that path. I never see anybody on that path. But obviously somebody uses that path. It's just not when I'm around. And so I think that when we sit here and we say, nobody's going to use this program, or why would they go there if we're not connected to it? You don't know that. You just don't have that information. And what are you going to do? Put out a survey? We're going to put out a survey to see if people are going to go with the, you know, our interest in doing a collaboration with Brushwood. I think that for $20,000, that we can try it for a year and see if it works. I think it's been a well laid out plan. You know, and there are a lot of details on this plan, a lot of details. There may not be exact hour requirements or staffing requirements, but there's a lot of thought put in this plan, and I think it's well done. So,
Mr. Clayton.
Again, just to try to respond to a couple of the points that were made, there's quite I think a careful reading of the programs would show there's quite a number of programs that are specific to Riverwoods. It's just not making programs that are available at Brushwood available to Riverwoods residents, number one. Number two, the programs are not all, as a matter of fact, most of them are not at Brushwood. There's several of them that are at Village Hall or at the campus and so on. And finally, I think for $20,000, what we're getting is we're leveraging an entire staff as opposed to a quarter-time person. We have out there a group of people at Brushwood who conceive of programs, that know how to execute programs, and have a track record of doing excellently at that. And so this is a way to, a much more cost-effective way of getting the kind of programming that I at least think that the village would really benefit from and would participate in at a really minimal cost.
Yes, Henry, you were on, but you just turned off. Did you want to say something? Is anyone else up? Trustee Chamberlain, you seem to be unmuted.
Sorry if you hear the microwave in the background. I don't think that we should start with the premise question of, have the villagers asked for something? What I do think we should start with is what we know about our villagers. They have said that they like community activities and they do like gathering. And so I think this type of arrangement can give them the type of programming that I think that they would ask for if they knew it existed. I also think that, particularly because of COVID-19, we are in a really unique situation where people are behaving very differently, and they are utilizing the outdoors and looking to nature to quell their anxieties more so ever than before. And I think we should take advantage of it, which is why I think it's worth giving this program a try. This is what people who live in Riverwoods care about is the fact that we have all this great space, and with COVID-19 and social distancing, this space really works for us. So I think that we have some programs that are already proposed here, but there are some additional things like the branding committee it came up with, and perhaps other people have other ideas. But I really think we have a unique opportunity, and we can turn something that's awful happening in the world into something good.
I don't know how to put my hand up, Mayor.
Oh, well, just
You
start.
go like this. You go like this.
Yeah, that works too. Henry's the only one that knows how to do the formal hand up.
It's under.
I can think of different ways to go. I'm not trying to, narrow the gap between different points of view, but just from my standpoint as an attorney, I would like to try and have. I look at all of the material here as being detailed, but more like a term sheet. And I would like something that just has. It can be somewhat informal. It doesn't have to have a big boilerplate legal agreement, but something that indicates what we're doing here. We're providing funds and why we're doing it. The fact that this is only for a year. I mean, all those things are they're stated, they're in the minutes maybe, but of course I feel more comfortable if there was some way to have like a short memorandum of understanding about what we're getting into. And also there are just a couple of nagging things always, like insurance and how we handle, if you're going to have people here, how that there has to be like some consultation, and that there's some understanding that there's some things that probably both of us have to do to make a relationship like that work. Probably people at Brushwood are used to dealing with some of those issues too. So, I'm not saying, I'm not trying to get into the policy debate. I'm just saying from my standpoint, if you're going to have that much interweaving of programming, there's issues of content, there's issues of things that when you're a host and you're having things on your campus, you kind of pay attention to. I know Brushwood would do it. It probably goes without saying, but that's what lawyers do. We say what goes without saying. So I'm just suggesting that if there's a way to say, well, okay, this is whatever the consensus of the board is coming out of this. If there's a way to, as you could direct me and someone from Brushwood to get together and put together something that fleshes out some of these, I'd say they're kind of low-level concerns, but typical concerns about such a relationship, so that, in a year, someone can look at it and say, okay, we don't have to renew, that's clear. Just something like that. I don't know. The idea is that the funds would be paid all at once. And, in terms of reporting, is there a designated person that Brushwood reports to? Is there a liaison? Some things like that. Who determines under the agreement that the activities are being performed? Who do we give notices to? I've said enough. I mean, I'm sorry, they're kind of boring things, but those are the kinds of things I would suggest that we could address, even in a kind of a informal memorandum. Maybe Brushwood has done something like that before.
I will say this, that the chair generally favors this. I think everybody's noticed how evenly split we are. What I would like to see before we actually have a vote is some type of memorandum, and give Catherine a chance to answer some of the questions that I think can be answered. They may not be answered to satisfaction of some, they may be answered to the satisfaction of others. But rather than having a formal vote now, I think it would be more appropriate to actually delineate some of those issues and have it very clear. Yes, Trustee Goldstein.
Yeah, I just have one more comment.
Yes.
I was a fundraiser for 10 years, the last 10 years. And I look at this as sort of like a menu. And I see it as very philanthropic. If this was me, and I'm sure Catherine has already thought about this, I would go to JP Morgan, ask them for $5,000. I'd go to Discover, ask them for $5,000, which is nothing for these guys. This is like, the items on here, lectures, storytelling, concerts, educational seminars. You can have JPM come in and do a seminar on mortgages. I just don't see this as something the village of Riverwoods should be providing on a whim, that our residents want this. We have no idea who's going to take advantage of this. And actually, I think I think corporate sponsorship is really the right mechanism to do a program like this. And I'm not saying it's not all great opportunities. I'm just not sure that this should be the business of a village of Riverwoods.
Understood, Eric. So again, I can't make a motion. I would prefer that we continue this to the next meeting with some of this answered and definitely act at the next meeting. Is everybody going to be here at the first meeting in July? Or at least where you can participate electronically again. But there were some very good questions answered that are asked, I should say, that should be addressed. I don't know if it will be persuasive, but I think they should be addressed as part of the program. And certainly I think we need to flesh out some of the agreement itself. Yes, Henry?
I don't want to leave the wrong impression. I am in favor of this proposal. I was just offering an alternative for the $20,000. So I didn't want to leave that impression that this was not something else.
Even if it's not where I end up breaking a tie vote, I still think we should have a written memorandum of agreement with a little more of the legal flesh on there before we're actually voting on this. Because there's some strong dissent, which has a very good basis. There's some strong support, which I think also has a good basis. So let's get it as clearly lined out as we can to see how much we can agree on. But if the board wants to put a motion up and vote tonight, that's up to the board. Again, I don't get to make motions.
I'm trying to be respectful of the need to have a delineated agreement.
Mm-hmm.
But before we continue to put a lot of time and effort into, especially expense of the village attorney and the people at Brushwood to delineate an agreement that's only going to get potentially voted down at the next meeting, I think what we should be doing, and I don't know procedurally exactly how to do this, so I hope for some guidance, but we should either be approving or unapproving or disapproving the relationship and the expenditure of funds subject to a satisfactory agreement that is put together between the village and Brushwood. That way, we know we have a vote and we know whether this is a program that is either going to go forward or it's going to be rejected. So what I would like to do is to put a motion on the floor that says that we approve the relationship as outlined in concept with Brushwood, that we're prepared to expend $20,000 to put it into effect, subject to an approval of an agreement that's put together by the village attorney in Brushwood.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? And I will limit it to one shot, everybody, because it's already close to 10 o'clock. Mike?
Yeah, discussion. I just think that we have really been unable to quantify the incremental benefit that the village of Riverwoods is going to receive as a result of this program. Because we all recognize that Brushwood is in close proximity to Riverwoods. It's highly available to all Riverwoods residents as it is to any other resident in the village. Many of the activities which were indicated in the proposal in black, which are the ones that are going to be the joint activities, are activities that are going to be done by Brushwood regardless and are available to our village residents regardless. Yes, maybe they'll be supplying 30 free tickets or some other, or maybe it will be at the village hall in some instance, but it's a program that is developed by Brushwood for Brushwood regardless. So unless we know that the delta between what we're going to get and what we are already going to be able to provide our village residents merely by going to Brushwood or becoming a member is worth that $20,000, I think that it's just imprudent to be spending $20,000 on this program, especially when every other meeting we're constantly talking about cutting costs. And here we are spending $20,000 without really knowing that the incremental benefit is there. And I want to make one other comment to address the issue of the bike path. When I made the comment last month, I made the comment that we should either maintain it or we should close it. Okay? I didn't make a comment that it was being used or not being used. I said if it's not going to be utilized or if it can't be utilized, it should be closed. So that's my comment.
Okay, Mike, I will respect that, but I will ask that everybody else remain on this topic, please. Are there any other people wishing to comment? Any other trustees? All right, then a roll call, please.
Trustee Chamberlain.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein.
Nay.
Trustee Haber.
Nay.
Trustee Hollander.
Nay.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
President Norris.
Aye. Madam Clerk, would you please state that? I assume since I voted that aye, please confirm.
Yes. 4 yes, 3 no.
Very well. Okay, let's go to something I think we can all agree on. An ordinance amending the Riverwoods Village Code by addition of Section 3-1-12 imposing a municipal retail motor fuel tax. Council?
Just would suggest a first reading on this one. It had an effective date in there that's maybe not, I pushed it back to next January. I think that's incorrect. This easy to confuse. There's some of the taxes that are collected by the Department of Revenue. You know, they have those times where you have to get the ordinance in by, and this is when you tax gasoline at a couple of cents a gallon, you ask the service station or the dealer to collect the tax and remit it to you. I think it's more analogous to what the hotel does with the hotel tax. I don't think we have the same constraints. I think in the memo or someplace I suggested that it would take effect. No, maybe I'm confusing things. I think we might want to give notice to the mobile station about when we want this to go into effect, because if it went into effect, you know, shortly, it would affect them and very quickly. So, before we can do that, if you look at the other villages, they have set up some procedures for reporting. They've got some forms so the dealer can, you know, fill out information. And I think the mayor and I were trying to avoid a situation where we lost the ability to capture the tax. I think the language here is correct, that this is the way the tax is handled, this is how it's imposed. But I think the mechanics of actually getting geared up to be able to receive it probably needs a little more work. So I'd suggest a first reading. The material that we provided in the packet gives you some basis for comparing what our neighbors do. Probably Buffalo Grove is the most immediate comparison, and their tax is 2 cents a gallon. So the idea was, I think this was a recommendation of the Finance Committee to look at some of the revenue sources, and I think this was one of them.
Do we have a motion to waive first reading?
Or no, just for first reading? I'm suggesting just first reading for this.
I'm sorry. You're right. Sorry, my fault. Sorry. Do I have a motion for first reading? I'm getting tired. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion this evening?
I had a question. I know when we first brought this up, we had discussed bringing this up with the Thornton's people and any reaction they might have. And did we do that?
I think they asked us if we had a tax and we said not yet, but we were going to look at one maybe, but see what Buffalo Grove did. I don't, I certainly can go back and have that conversation with them.
I think we owe it to them to tell them, since we have done it now.
Yeah, my concern was just, I think the tax that we're proposing will not do this, but my concern was we don't want to put them in a position where they aren't earning the kinds of sales that they anticipated.
No, that's
Are
one
they-
reason we looked at Buffalo Grove specifically, since that's the closest station to them. But yes, we will continue to communicate with them. Henry, you have your hand up.
What is the estimated revenue at the 2-cent level?
Mike,
From
do you
the
remember what
existing
was said on
certification?
that?
I don't have that right at my fingertips, but it was in the last financial package that,
I believe it was $200,000 or $300,000 from what Thornton's was projecting. But again, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm fairly certain because it was going to make up a big portion of what we had lost.
That was pre-COVID too. And that was assuming people driving as much as they are, you know.
That was based on Thornton's projections of what their volume of sales would be.
But it would apply to the station on Deerfield and Sanders, right?
Yes.
Do we know what the amount of gas sold there is? Do we know what it would, if Thornton's never comes to fruition, do we have any idea as to what the tax would generate?
I think and again, Mike, if you remember, say so, but I think it was like 25 or 50,000. But again, I also have to be careful of what I say based on what I know that I'm not
at
supposed
10
to.
o'clock at night, I barely remember who my name is. So.
But it's a significant amount of money. You know, it doesn't close everything, but fairly significant, relatively painless place to go. Any further discussion? If not, I hate to say it, but we need a roll call for a first reading.
Trustee Chamberlain.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein.
Aye.
Trustee Haber.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
Okay, well, we ended on a note of unanimity. Unless somebody has any reason to go into executive session, which I do not. The next meeting is July 7th, so everybody have a good 4th of July. Mr. Clayton.
Just one quick comment. I'd like to formally put a thank you on the record to the RPC for their donation of the 350, I think it was, masks that apparently went out right away within about a half a day. We ran through all of them. So thanks to the RPC.
Agreed. So
I move for adjournment.
Second.
Okay, and I ain't gonna listen to no discussion. All in favor? Whoops, give me a roll call so everybody won't get called back.
Trustee Chamberlain.
Aye.
Trustee Clayton.
Aye.
Trustee Goldstein. Trustee Haber.
Aye.
Trustee Hollander.
Aye.
Trustee Jamerson.
Aye.
All right, now I can say the next meeting is on the 7th. Everybody have a safe and happy 4th of July as much as anybody can have, since I don't think there are any fireworks anywhere or anything, but do enjoy it. And we are adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Night.